Everyone in this world is presently thinking only one thing. When will this coronavirus scare get over? At the same time, like me, most of you probably are also thinking, what will life be like when it is over? One thing is sure, the world is not going to be the same as it was before Corona. Most of us have seen the extent of devastation that can happen from something no one saw coming. It will probably be fair to agree that we will see major shift in our social and political structures. I see a major overhaul in economic structures too. And this is what we are going to discuss in this session. When something of this scale happens, we find the world go through a major shift, at least temporarily. I call it a reset. Corona is a big reset for us. A big reset to our lives, a big reset to our economy, and to a certain extent, a big reset to the whole world. After this is over, a lot of things are going to start in some way, all the way from the start. Obviously, we will need a lot of new initiatives. It's already happening. Some countries are offering stimulus package to kickstart their economy, which is already sagging. Some are building rescue task force to tackle such mass-scale human suffering. Every country is doing whatever they can to tackle this emergency. More such initiatives will be visible when we are out of this emergency. This scare has also exposed the world's fragile power equation. Interestingly, this scare has made us realize that every country will need to deal with this emergency on its own. We cannot look up to the powers that claim to bring order in this world. The shift in the world order is already visible. Now, this is going to be more apparent as we go forward. New powers will emerge, maybe on local levels. These powers are the powers that the world is going to recognize because they will help to build the world again. The biggest challenge we will see will certainly be in the economic policies. Every country has a task in its hand to decide its priorities in this emergency time, and will need to take actions to save the economy and provide the right leadership to deal with it. What will be those economic policies? Which part of the economy will receive maximum attention? What will the risks and opportunities be as a result? I will try to answer questions most of you may have in this session. One of the first resets that this world is going to be witnessing is about the money itself. Now, you all must be hearing about various stimulus package that various countries are giving to their people. And leading the whole pack is United States. We've just heard that United States has offered a package of $2 trillion. Now, what that means? To be able to see that in real picture, let's go and find out what some data says. Here in front of me is the Wikipedia statistics that talks about the history of United States public debt. Now remember, public debt is the total debt that the country has in its public, and if you add it to the debt that United States offers to the other countries in the world, it becomes a gross debt. Now, if we were to go down a little bit and see if we can find a graph that explains it pretty obviously, is right here. This is the graph we are looking at. So the black line is the gross debt and the red line is the public debt. Even though it seems almost similar, but let's focus on the gross debt because this has direct relation to the dollar that is getting printed. Let's look at the line all the way till about 1980, 81, 82. It's quite flat. This was the time when there was a direct relationship between dollar conversion to gold ratio. But in 1980-81, that connection was broken. And here, look at the graph. Suddenly, the public debt started to increase. Now, this is the time frame when dollars were getting printed at unprecedented rate. So till about 1980 to about 2000, it rose anywhere from about $2.5 trillion to about $7 trillion. And if you remember, right around 2000, when the dot-com bust happened, the world went through a minor reset in the larger parlance, but it was a reset after all. But yet, in the 20 years between 1981 to about 2000, United States printed almost $5 trillion. And all the way from 2000 till about 2008, right here. This is when the subprime debt busted and it was about to take the whole world's economy into tailspin. And after that, look at the graph. It's going almost vertically. Right around $10 trillion. In about 2019, the total gross debt that United States holds is about $23 trillion. So in just 10 years, United States have printed more than $13 trillion. What does it mean? Now we have to look at it from the perspective of the fact that dollar is the predominant currency of the world, and no other currency comes even close to giving it a competition or as an alternative. Therefore, it's very easy for United States to keep printing dollar without worrying about whether the dollar printed is losing value or not. Why? Because of the demand of dollar across the world in absence of any alternative. Now, because the printing machine of dollar is owned by United States, so it's very easy just to go ahead and print more dollars. And that's exactly what we have seen. It's almost going vertically. Now this $13 trillion that was printed in last 10 years, if you compare with what the dollar was worth in terms of its contribution to the economy of United States only, look at it right here. So debt as percentage of GDP, which essentially means that whether GDP will be in a position to pay off the debt in case somebody were to ask for the money back. So all the way since about 1945, right after Second World War, till about 1980, till the time when the dollar was pegged to the gold value, the debt to GDP ratio kept declining, and it came down all the way till about 30%. But right after that peg was withdrawn, and therefore giving United States the free hand to print as many dollars as they could, this GDP ratio, debt to GDP ratio, just watch it, kept increasing, which means that the printing of the dollar was feeding into the economy of United States, piling up debt over debt over debt. It did take some breather, and I think it was around Clinton's time frame when there was a consensus among the government that they will bring down the debt to GDP ratio. It happened till about 2000, and then 2001, 9/11 happened, and look at the graph going back again. And after 2008, the debt to GDP ratio was probably not even considered, and therefore look at this jump. And today it's sitting at more than 100%. Yet, all it means is that the dollars that are getting printed is essentially the free money that is being given to people and the economy. That's what I'm talking about in this case. Whenever reset happens, the governments just start printing money. Why they do that? Because they want to hand over money in people's hand. And why they want to do that? Because they want people to spend money. People have dollars in their hand and they just go start spending. And when they spend, technically, economy grows. Because every dollar you spend will get added to the GDP, and therefore everybody thinks that GDP is increasing. Well, this is the reality. The more money you print, the more money that gets added to the GDP makes us believe that the GDP is going up. Something like that is going to happen here as well. While we are already witnessing such behavior in form of a stimulus package, what it essentially means is that United States is going to print dollars over dollars and hand it over to people, to the corporates, and to the government to spend, just in the name of giving boost to the economy. The other thing that you probably would have noticed is that governments across the world have started to bring their interest rates down. Again, why they do that is because they want people, the corporate and the government to start borrowing money from the central bank at low interest. In other words, they want you to borrow money because the interest rates are so low. The reason is again in form of the money given to the individuals and the corporates to spend so that that dollar gets added to the GDP and therefore the GDP can go up. What we will also witness, we probably have not seen so far, but we are going to see generous loans being given to individuals and to the corporates. Now these loans, whether these corporates require or not, they will be enticed because the interest rates, which were just brought down, will force them, will lure them into borrowing more. And remember, because the government wants you to borrow, they will probably open the floodgate for people to start borrowing. Now, this is what happened after 2008 when in the name of quantitative easing, United States printed a lot of money. But behind the scenes, all the mess up that almost all the banks did was being written off because they were failing. And if the banks had failed, the whole economy would have collapsed. So in the name of saving economy, they saved the banks. And to save the banks, they just wrote off the loans. All the debts that those banks were holding were written off. And the banks went back doing the same thing again. This time as well, not only the United States, I'm just taking the example of United States because the dollar is the predominant currency of the world and therefore the behavior of the dollar is going to transfer across all other economies. So when I'm talking about United States, be sure that the ripple effect is going to encompass every other country, every other currency in the world. So we come back to the same point. There will be lots of free money after the coronavirus scare is behind us. But then, what is this free money going to do to us? Let's not assume that the world is living in isolation. When United States prints money, and they will print a lot, they will print a lot because that's the only thing they know how to handle the economy. But what's going to happen to the world? When dollar is printed, obviously there will be a lot of money supply in the economy of United States, which means that United States has decided to grow by printing money. But if other countries do not do that, they will immediately get into recession because their economic system will not run. they'll be in dire need of money to be able to do the same thing that the United States did. So therefore, they will be forced to print money themselves. Now, say, for example, right after 2008, when United States was printing a lot of money, other countries were also forced to print as much money. Now, when other countries also print a lot of money, obviously there is an exchange rate decided in terms of the supply and the demand. So the value of the currency of the other countries with respect to United States start to fall. Why? Because when the other country starts printing a lot of money, there will be a lot of money chasing dollar. So with respect to dollar, the value of other currencies will start to fall if they start printing money. Now remember, they will be forced to print money. So therefore, devaluation of their currency is given. To be able to appreciate the impact of dollar printing and money printing in other currencies, let's take an example of the currency exchange rates between dollar and, let's say, rupees. And I will like to draw your attention right here in around 2008, when the value of rupee vis-a-vis dollar was close to 40. Right? Now that's where the subprime debt crisis happened, and obviously the United States started printing more and more money to be able to bail their banks out. And obviously India was also forced to increase their money supply to support their economy. And the moment it is done, look at this. In no time, the value of a rupee in terms of dollar moves from about little less than 40 all the way till about 50. That's a good 25% jump in less than 6 months. In other words, the purchasing power of rupee went down by 25% vis-a-vis dollar. Now, what was the problem? The problem was subprime happening in United States. And where was the impact? The impact was on the emerging economies like India, where they lost their currency value by 25% in no time. Let's try and zoom in a little bit to our current scenario. Okay. We'll go to last 1 year graph. Right here, we are sitting right here, and apparently 75 rupees to a dollar. That's the exchange rate. And what was it in, say, February? It was 71. It lost about 5% or more in just a month because of this corona crisis. And I can assure you that this is not going to end right here. The more US is going to print money, the more India will have to print rupees, and as an effect, the rupee is going to depreciate. Now, it could depreciate 10%, maybe 20%, maybe 25% like we saw in 2008, but it will. So it is not going to stay at 75. In my opinion, from 70, it should go all the way till about 90 if it lost about 25% like it did in 2008. And in all probability, it is going to. Because the scenario is theoretically different, but technically the same. Theoretically because the cause is different, but the impact is entirely different. In this case, as compared to what it was back in 2008. Remember, back in 2008, the world did not quarantine itself. They were not forced to live in their rooms to isolate themselves. Unlike this time, when everybody is forced to stay in their homes, which means there is nobody out there doing any productive work. And therefore, no work is getting done. And if no work is getting done, then obviously there is nothing that is getting produced in the GDP. So maybe this time a 25% loss in value will not suffice. It might lose even more. Such devaluations are not limited to US versus India. It is going to be affecting all other economies. Even all the major currencies like the pound, the yen, the euro. But it is going to be more impactful to the emerging economies or the economies whose currencies are far more weaker than the dollar. So therefore, devaluation is an obvious outcome as a result of US printing more and more money. So even in the other economies, there will be lots of free money. So how the world has changed? The world has changed because now, after the corona scare is behind us, we'll have lots of free money in our hands. We now know that there will be a lot of free money in the system because of this corona scare. But what will this free money chase? If there is money out there, it is going to chase something. Whatever it chases, one thing is clear, that inflation is going to return. Now I understand that inflation is one of the last things people have on their minds right now. But very soon, this is going to become one of the issues because of this free money that is going to be printed unabated in the system. Now I want you to pay special attention to this subject because whatever the free money is going to chase, inflation is going to show up there. It may not happen now, maybe not for the next 6 months, but it will return sooner or later. So what exactly will money chase? Well, in order to understand that, let's see what happened right after 2008. This is the US inflation chart of the last 10 years. As you can see, this moved somewhere between 0 and 4%. And invariably, it stayed pretty close to 2% or so overall. Now, even at this point of time, the inflation in the United States is about little more than 2%. As a matter of fact, if you look at, we are having 2012, let me just break it down to last 25 years. So this is where we are. About 2008, inflation actually went negative. Obviously, as a result of that reset, when the banks had to be bailed out, there was no growth. In fact, there was negative growth, as we can see here. But even as a result of more than $13 trillion printed, the inflation in the United States did not move a lot. So as a matter of fact, this inflation chart doesn't tell us much as to which sector, which industry the free money actually went to. But we know for sure that there are a couple of industries that have seen phenomenal rise in the last 10 years. So for example, let me go to the home price index. This chart shows the home price index for about last 70 years, which obviously has been increasing substantially. But what I want you to focus is the last 10 years right here. This is where the inflation started to rise. The price of the house price started to rise. So right after 2008, obviously because of the scare, the price of the house fell significantly, more than 20% or so. But right around 2011, Obviously, because of a lot of free money coming in the system, it started going in the real estate. Look at this. The median price of the US house in 2011 was about 175K. And in just 8 years, it went beyond $250,000. Now that's a significant raise because it's almost 30-40% raise. And this is the median price I'm talking about. So obviously, the free money that was in the system went into real estate. Now, it's important to emphasize that real estate is the largest industry in any economy. Just in the United States, the real estate sector commands about 17% of the overall GDP. So we can conclude that a lot of free money went into real estate, and therefore the inflation, the price index, going up. That was one part. Now I want to draw your attention to the stock market. I am at a Nasdaq Composite Index, and let's go back to about 2008 time frame. Obviously, there was a crash right here. But ever since 2009, the market has gone only in one direction, and that is up. Nasdaq, which fell to about 1400 or so points, went all the way to about 10,000 points, almost 7-8 times in the last 10 years. We can easily conclude that the free money in the system actually went into the stocks as well. And the graph tells the whole story. Now that was United States. What about the other markets, especially the emerging markets? Let's look at India, for example. This is 2008. The inflation was about 6%. Now, as a result of the free money being printed, the inflation went all the way till about 12% and beyond. And the high inflation regime stayed all the way till about 2014. That's a good 5 years of a very high inflation regime. So obviously in the Indian context, the free money that was in the system resulted in inflation, the overall inflation in fact, going up. And what happened to the Indian stock market? Well, this is Nifty 50, one of the indices in the Indian market. Almost the same story. It did fall in the aftermath of 2008, but ever since 2009, it went up. Not as much as the US market, but look at this. All the way from 3,000 mark, it went to about 12,000 mark. That's 4 times. Now remember, US was almost 10 times. The Indian market went up 4 times. Now that is the impact we are talking about. In the emerging markets as well, free money is going to induce inflation. People are not going to complain about it, by the way. Especially in situations like this, when the government is handing over money, people will definitely not complain. But what they will not realize is that somewhere, because of this free money getting into their hand, this free money is chasing something which is driving up the inflation. In some way, the governments would want to induce inflation. Why? Because it makes them look good. Now, when the inflation comes in, obviously every rupee, every dollar spent will be added in the GDP number, and therefore the GDP as a whole will start looking up. Now that gives us a good feeling that the GDP is going up, whereas what actually is happening is that all the free money is getting into GDP, assuming that more or less the growth, the development, the production is essentially the same, more money will be chasing the same amount of product. Therefore, the price of this commodity or any assets is going to inflate. And because nobody will complain about inflation, everybody will be happy because the prices of their assets or the commodities are going up. No one will care about the net growth. Now, this is the scary part. When the inflation is high and the real growth is almost zero, the GDP is going to grow at the rate of inflation. It means it is going to grow irrespective. But if you were to subtract the inflation rate from the GDP, that is the real growth. And in all probability, if the inflation is very high, the net growth is probably negative. But then that figure is not something we talk about. No one cares about the net growth. So far, we have seen two important components of the reset because of this corona scare. The first one that we have discussed is that there will be a lot of free money induced in the system deliberately. And we have also established that this free money in the system is going to chase the products that are limited in number anyways, and therefore the inflation is going to rise. But what is the overall economic outlook in that case? Now, at this point of time, let me warn you that there will be a lot of things happening, most of which, as normal people, we will never be able to know. There might be some news here and there, but a lot of resets would actually be happening in the system itself. In this challenging time, when negative news is abound, it's actually an opportunity for the system to throw all the skeletons out of their closet. In this gloomy time frame, when everybody is scared, these companies, these individuals will come out, maybe declare their bankruptcy or declare their inability to pay the debt, whatever it is, but they are all going to come out and give out the negative news. Now, effectively, what's going to happen is that everybody will try and throw out the negative news as much as they can in this gloomy time frame, so that most of the news go out unnoticed. I'm sure a lot of bad news are going to come from various companies, from various sectors. We're already watching a lot of industries getting hit because of this corona scare. Airlines, for example. Now, obviously, because of the restraint or even closure of the airlines flying in and out of any country, the airlines are absolutely in a big problem. And therefore, some kind of bail package will have to be given to the airlines to be able to continue operating. But if we look at the time frame before the corona scare, was the airline industry doing better? And the answer is no. The airlines were actually struggling. Now, because of corona scare, some sympathy will go out to the industries that are struggling. Airlines, healthcare, tourism. These are all going to be badly hit, no doubt about it. But maybe they were not doing better anyways. But because of this situation, a lot of such industries will be bailed out, and all the bad news will get compensated and camouflaged because of this corona scare. So what happens to the actual growth? Now, this is where it gets even more interesting. We are all anticipating that the economic growth is going to take a big hit, primarily because everything is closed, people are inside their homes, factories are running at their minimum, so obviously the production is going to be minimum. GDP therefore has to drop. But after the corona scare is behind us, what's going to happen to those industries? Are we going to return to the previous productivity anytime soon? The answer is no. That's not going to happen. Now, as a matter of fact, individuals like you and me, we will not be spending a lot of money. So if we have money, we'll probably keep it for the rainy days. Now, if we don't go out buy things, obviously the companies that are producing those products will have no incentive to continue producing or even increasing their production. So where will this free money go? They will definitely not go towards actual production. They will definitely not go towards increasing the capacity of factories, the manufacturing, or maybe even traveling. People are going to be skeptical about spending, and therefore the commodities, the necessary stuffs will not see a lot of growth in a few months and years after the corona scare is behind us. But remember, we still have that free money out in the system. That is going to change something. So what happens to the inflation? What happens to the GDP? That money will eventually come in the system. They will get spent somewhere, eventually get added to the GDP. Now GDP is going to really look good, but only because this new money is getting added in the figures of the GDP. So this time, the growth is not productivity related growth, it is the inflation driven growth. It is the free money that is getting added to the growth. So from now on till about 3 years, when things are actually going to get reset in a better way, when the money and the productivity actually go to the factories, to the manufacturing, and to the real stuffs, we are going to see inflation driven growth only. Even though the numbers are going to swell everywhere, industries are going to look good, but only in terms of figure, not in real growth. And we can see from the fact that in the next 3 years, because of the slowdown, no real jobs are going to get created. People are not going to hire anymore. The companies are not going to hire anymore. So if the job creation is not happening, then obviously you know that the real production, the real growth is not happening. It is only happening because of the free money that is deliberately being induced in the system. Let's look at the GDP growth of United States, and I find it very curious. I'm sure you will also. 2009, it was negative 2.5%. 2010, it went back to 2.5, the typical growth rate, and had pretty much been there ever since. In the last 10 years, United States has grown by less than 2.5%. Now think about it. The 13 trillion extra dollars that got printed, besides the existing GDP that was there back in 2008, could only get you a flat 2.5% growth rate. Now obviously, the GDP figures are not telling the exact story of where these $13 trillion went. The money that goes in stock do not get added to the GDP, so therefore they will not get reflected here. But we saw that the stocks had seen 10 times rise in the last 10 years. So a big chunk of the free money that got printed in the United States system went to the stocks but never came to the GDP. Now this is the reason why the GDP stayed flat, but the assets like stocks, the real estate, and the other assets got inflated. Now what does that mean now? Now that we have a lot of free money going to come in the system, which nobody is going to complain about. Now we'll also have a significant inflation going into various sectors, which again nobody will complain about. Then what is going to happen? Where exactly is the free money going to go? What happened after 2008-9? We have seen that real estate went through the roofs. The stocks had a phenomenal gain. Now, some of the economists termed the situation to be some kind of asset bubble. Why asset bubble? Because the free money was not going into real growth of the economy, like the factories, the manufacturing, or the goods, but actually it went into assets. People bought safer havens because money had nothing better to do than to buy assets. So therefore, assets inflated in price. So technically, that is an asset bubble. Now, are we going to see something similar again? In all probability, that's how it is going to happen again. It has happened many times in the history, and it is going to happen again. Primarily because economies of the world today are free to print as many currency as possible. United States, of course, is leading the pack, but it's easier for any country to print more money. Now they print either because it's easy thing to do or because they are forced to do, because United States is doing that is a different matter. But at the end of the day, every economy in the world is inducing currencies over currencies in their system. Now all the new currency that is getting printed in the system is chasing the same amount of assets in the world. So obviously, the assets are going to increase in the price, thus creating an asset bubble. So this time, like many other times in the past, I am inclined to think in the same direction as in the past, because there is no real incentive for any business to invest in growth or invest in taking risks. And because the money is very easily available, there will be no interest rates for some time. The loans are going to be coming easily. Write-offs are going to happen. So therefore, people are going to invest in real estates, the stocks. And a curious case that I personally look for is gold. Let's look at the historic price of gold. We are right here in 2008. Now, obviously, the gold had been witnessing a significant growth even before 2008. We had a sharp drop because of the subprime crisis. But watch this. 2009 till about 2012. The gold price went all the way from about $700 to more than $2,000 at some point. And this was one of the steepest rise of the gold price in the history. What happened here? I attribute this sudden increase in the price of gold to free money. Now remember, the stock price or even the real estate prices did not really move up from 2009 till 2011. Obviously, because people were very skeptical. They did not know whether the stocks are going to do well, the real estate is going to do well. It was in doldrums because of the subprime crisis. But because a lot of free money was getting printed, one of the safest places people could go to was gold. And this was the time when actually the interest in gold across the world went up sharply, and hence the price rise. This kind of price rise was never seen in the history, primarily because this kind of free money was never seen in the history. This time as well, I am very hopeful that gold is going to be seen as one of the safest havens to start with. So initially, the free money which is going to get printed in the system across the world is going to go into gold. And I can explain that very easily. Look at the figure right now. This is the coronavirus scare time frame. Now remember, I showed you that almost all the stocks have fallen 30% or so. The major indices have fallen 30% or so. right here. The stocks have fallen significantly. But what's happening to gold? The gold prices are going up. Now, obviously, at this point of time, people are moving towards the safer haven, which is gold. But this is going to get even serious because of the fact that a lot of new money is waiting to be absorbed by gold. This free money is not going to go into stocks immediately. The free money is not going to get into specific growth or any industry significantly. So therefore, people are going to first place their bets to secure themselves. And that is gold. Now, this is where the opportunity lies. In all probability, the world is going to move into investing in the assets which are already existing. So watch out for the real estate, watch out for the stocks, watch out for gold. This is where people are going to be investing when the free money gets into their hand. Now we get to that part where we see how the world is now going to change in terms of the way we operate, in terms of the way we do business. The first impact that I foresee happening is on globalization. Globalization has definitely created a lot of opportunities for those areas in the world that were earlier either unheard of or were so remote that no one even cared about or even touched. But because of the globalization, a lot of people across the world, especially on the remote areas, got a chance to make their contribution in the growth of the economy. But this time, the corona scare is going to put an entirely different perspective in the minds of people. Why? Because now we see that along with the economic globalization, there are globalization also of many negative stuffs that can really hurt the human civilization. Corona is a real case of what a globalization of any scare can get to. Think about it. This scare, wherever it originated from, has become a real threat to humankind. It's almost looking as an uncontrollable pandemic which is spreading like wildfire. So therefore, people are now going to think about the outsourced pandemic that can be happening because of the globalization. Now, will people try and stop this globalization for such threats not go beyond certain geography? We'll have to see. But one thing is clear, that this is something that we have not seen before in our lifetimes. And probably the next generation is not going to see anytime soon. But it has definitely showed us that such threats are real. The threats of pandemic, the threats of chemical and the biological warfare can easily percolate into the borders which have nothing to do with such experiments. But still, because of globalization, because of people moving into different countries, the spread of such pandemic will definitely have people think about closing their borders. And I can see a lot of talks going around on various social medias and news. So this is going to be real because people are now going to think about ways to prevent such spread from happening. So we are going to see a lot of controls over borders, over immigration, and so on and so forth. And that will definitely have impact on the economy and globalized economy in certain way. But there are some silver line as well, because I can see that because of this scare, the companies, the people are finding new ways to continue to work. People are working from home. People are still contributing sitting from home. So therefore, there is a possibility that we will learn about such options being there. For example, remote work as a concept has been there for some time, but it was not getting implemented for whatever reasons. But now that we are all locked up into our homes, we are still able to do something because of the infrastructure, because of the internet, because of the communication infrastructure. This new learning is going to really have impact on the economy, impact on the way we work. So remote work, now of course remote work is safer because people can stay in their home and stay healthy. But what I also feel that the companies are now going to assess whether remote work is also cost effective. Now think about it. When we go to office, we use transportation, and most of the times this transportation is personal. People use their personal cars to go to office. Now think about it. There are millions of cars going to the office in the morning and coming back home in the evening. If even a part of it can be eliminated, think of the ways companies can actually save a lot of money just because they don't have to maintain the office infrastructure anymore. So if a lot of people work from home, the companies will now not need to have all the kinds of spaces they have to maintain. So I see remote work a new way of work style that the world is now going to see. Now the other thing I am watching happening is that people and in fact companies are preferring part-time employment opportunities. Now hiring is an expensive process as well as a very expensive maintenance. Companies not only have to pay employees' salaries, but they have to pay for their welfares. It's much easier for the companies to hire those talents that can work part-time and deliver. And if that can happen, then obviously companies will prefer not to hire, but only use the contracts. Now contractors can use the opportunity to work part-time across different companies. Of course, easy for them because they can work the way they want, in the timeline they want, in the environment they want. And at the same time, they can contribute to various initiatives going in various companies. So therefore, part-time employment is one of the new things that is going to catch up because of this corona scare as well. The next 3 years are going to be very crucial for the world and of course its economy, considering that corona is now behind us. We need to be very careful because a lot of changes are expected, both on the society level as well as economic level. So we have to watch out for it. Now at the same time, the changes are going to present before us significant amount of opportunities. And if we know where the changes are going to happen, for example, where the money is going to go, where inflation is going to kick in, and if we can be there in time, then it is also an opportunity to gain from. Anyways, I wish you all the best. I hope we come out of this corona scare as soon as possible and move on with our lives, maybe in a new way, maybe in a better way. Thanks a lot for watching.